Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're doing something a bit different. We're going to look way past the sidelines, past the locker rooms, and deep into the boardrooms and coffee shops. Why? To uncover the true art, the architecture, and the hidden reality of what it actually takes to be a great coach. See, there's this massive misconception about what happens when a pro coach steps into their arena. So today, we're literally breaking down the mechanics of true human transformation.
All right, let's dive right into this. We all have this ingrained image in our heads, don't we? We tend to look at coaching through the lens of this Hollywood myth. You know the one. The fiery, screaming locker room speech, the tactical genius aggressively drawing up a play on a whiteboard, or maybe the charismatic guru handing out these magical, ready-made blueprints for success. But if you actually ask anyone who's spent years in the trenches of human development, they'll tell you the reality is completely different. You really have to look past the whistle and the clipboard. True coaching, it's built on a quiet, almost invisible infrastructure of deep trust, complex psychology, and just immense patience.
Here's a crucial point to remember. A master coach doesn't just hand out answers. Actually, scratch that. Coaching is rarely about having all the answers at all. It's about having the exact right questions. It's not about giving someone a cheat sheet for life or business. Instead, it's about acting as a guide. You're asking the precise and, frankly, sometimes really difficult questions that unlock a person's own understanding and potential.
Which brings us to part one, the modern coach.
You know, the fundamental definition of coaching has totally evolved in the modern era. At its absolute core, coaching is the art and science of helping another person grow. And whether that goal is shaving seconds off a sprint, scaling a massive tech startup, or navigating a crazy midlife career transition, the fundamental mechanism, it remains exactly the same. The legendary Tom Landry hit the nail on the head. He said a coach is someone who tells you what you don't want to hear, who has you see what you don't want to see, so you can be who you always knew you could be. It is entirely about facilitating that difficult but absolutely necessary growth.
And because of that understanding, the role of the coach has shifted dramatically over the years. That old school authoritarian model, that whole my way or the highway dictator approach, yeah, that's pretty much dead. It just doesn't work for high-level, sustained development. Today's coach operates way more like an architect. They aren't barking orders anymore. They are collaboratively designing an environment where a person's natural potential can just seamlessly collide with peak performance.
Let's move on and see how this builds in part two, the three hidden pillars. So what actually separates an amateur who just kind of gives advice from a master coach who genuinely alters the trajectory of a life? Well, it comes down to mastery over three specific hidden pillars. The first one, active listening. Look, poor coaches talk just to hear themselves speak. They love the sound of their own advice. Master coaches, however, listen intensely to hear what isn't being said. They're constantly observing those micro-expressions, changes in a client's posture, slight shifts in their vocal tone, and those subtle little hesitations that signal deep-seated self-doubt. They're basically decoding the unspoken psychological cues that the client might not even be aware of themselves. And this brilliantly illustrates how active listening translates into a tangible metric in the real world, the 80-20 rule. A fantastic rule of thumb in exceptional coaching is that the client should be speaking 80% of the time. The coach uses the remaining 20% to ask those powerful questions and maximize their impact. It's a real, measurable way to prove that the session is about the client's discovery, not the coach's ego. Okay, that brings us to the second pillar, emotional intelligence, or EQ. Let's be real. Every single client or athlete arrives with some form of psychological baggage. It could be a paralyzing fear of failure, raging imposter syndrome, or maybe just extreme external stressors from their personal lives. A master coach absolutely must possess the emotional agility to read a room instantly. They have to know in a split second, does this person need a demanding, hard push today, or do they need a psychological safe harbor because they're standing right on the edge of complete burnout?
Then we hit the third pillar, and honestly, this is where the actual transformation happens. Deliberate discomfort. See, growth and comfort simply cannot coexist. You literally have to leave one to get to the other. A coach's job is to gently but firmly stretch a person's comfort zone, and it is an incredibly delicate balancing act. If you push too little, the client stagnates and nothing changes. But if you push too hard, especially without having built a rock-solid foundation of trust first, the client snaps. Finding that exact edge of discomfort, that's the true art form.
But constantly managing that delicate balance, constantly pushing people to their absolute limits, well, it begs a really profound question. What does coaching take out of the coach?
Which leads us right into part three, the hidden cost. This is a side of the profession we almost never talk about. We constantly see the accolades, the trophies, and the massive celebrations when a client succeeds, right? But we rarely discuss the unseen consequences of the job that happen far away from the spotlight. Coaching, at its highest level, is an act of radical emotional expenditure. Just think about the immense amount of energy required to hold space for someone else's wild ambitions, their deepest frustrations, and their crushing failures. As a coach, you are constantly absorbing the anxieties of others. You take in all their chaos, their stress, and their doubt, and your job is to somehow translate all of that heavy anxiety into clear, actionable clarity for them. It is profoundly, deeply draining work.
Furthermore, a true coach must possess a massive amount of humility. You literally have to detach your own ego completely from the outcome. When the client wins, the client gets the glory. And hey, that's exactly how it should be. But when the client loses, the coach steps in to shoulder the responsibility. They have to dissect the failure with the client without ever assigning blame. They carry the heavy weight of the loss privately, while giving away all the joy of the victory publicly.
So let's bring it all together in Part 4, the ultimate verdict.
With all of that unseen burden, that radical emotional expenditure, and all that heavy lifting behind the scenes, why would anyone choose a profession that's so demanding, so exhausting, and honestly often so completely thankless? To answer that, we have to look at what it truly means to dedicate your life to the success of others. It requires you to wear multiple, exhausting hats simultaneously. You've got to be a brilliant strategist, a careful psychologist, a patient sounding board, and occasionally, when everything is falling apart and the client just wants to quit, you have to be the absolute only person in the room who still firmly believes that the goal is possible. But here's the thing. There is an ultimate payoff that makes every single ounce of that emotional expenditure worth it, the light bulb moment. When you sit across from someone and you watch that light bulb suddenly go on in their eyes, when they achieve something they genuinely, deeply thought was impossible just months before, there is no cleaner, truer satisfaction on earth. You know, as the saying goes, a great coach doesn't pull you up from the top of the mountain. They hike alongside you, pointing out the footholds you might be too exhausted or distracted to see. You didn't climb the mountain for them, but you helped them realize they had the immense strength to make it to the summit themselves. So, I'll leave you with this to think about. Who are those quiet architects and coaches in your own life who pointed out your footholds? And more importantly, do you have what it takes to hike alongside someone else? Thanks for joining me on this explainer today, and keep climbing.